Welcome to Incessantly Seeking, where we discuss the pursuits that drive our lives with a new guest every Friday. I'm your host, Luciana Faulhaber, and today we're discussing the pursuit of independence. This is a special podcast episode for me. I have here Kelly Lewis, who just wrote Tell Her She Can't. It's an amazing book that compiles stories of amazing women that are breaking grounds all over the United States. Now, you got to tell a little bit about our story. I feel super special to be part of this book and this storytelling group of women. But I would love for our listeners and our people watching, our audience, to hear a bit about your story. What is that drives your life? What drove you to write these stories and advocate for women?
Totally. Well, I love the name of this podcast, by the way. I think it's such a great title. I grew up in an environment that was full of people who really seemed to make it a personal mission to silence me and to tell me that I wasn't good enough and I was weird and I wasn't going to fit in and, I'd never make it. And I really had to fight through that. But then also what happened is as I was going through that, there was this little voice inside of me that was like, don't listen. Like, do not listen to this. And that kind of voice of defiance really carried me through the darkest days. And I was young. I mean, this started when I was like 5 and it went until 17. But I do attribute a lot of my success as an adult, really to those time periods, because it was in those moments that I was like, I am going to show everyone, like I'm going to prove everyone wrong. And I did a lot of really, different things. Like I moved out, I lived in Hawaii and I moved out 3 days after my high school graduation and I moved 4,000 miles away. So like I really didn't follow the conventional path. And once I could be independent, I was. And I was like, I'm going to run with this. So that sort of spirit of defiance and, resilience really has always been with me. And that's how this book came to be.
Do you think that this thing that drove you, this pursuit of independence, through this little voice, where do you think that came from?
I actually, spiritually, I think that, we're all composed of different elements. And I think that I attribute that as like one of my angels or like one of my voices. And I think it's been with me since I was really, really young. And I also have this belief that, even though I couldn't understand it at the time, I did choose this path before I even got here. So like I knew all of this stuff that was going to happen and I didn't know why, but I know now. And so I think, and that's a very woo-woo perspective and not everyone is going to share that. And I do remember and I grew up in a household where my mom was very spiritual and she would always say things like this to me. And I remember when I was going through stuff, I would be like, that's not true. I didn't choose this. You chose this. You married him, and like really angry about it. But now, like with perspective and time, and especially now having a project where I give that trauma a purpose that's really enacting change, I understand what she meant. And I do believe that. Like I believe that we know what our purpose is and we all have one, and it just sometimes takes a little while to figure out why things are happening to you before you can see, the greater purpose.
And I really love what you said about that in your mom and that relationship, because I feel like I had the same experience with my mom. There was a lot of conflict when we were growing up. And she would say to me like, oh, when you grow up, you understand. When you have your own kids, you understand. I mean, I don't have my kids yet, but I feel like my projects are my kids. And, fortunately, they don't talk back to me. Well, at least not yet. But, there is a lot of understanding that we go through, in hindsight when we call it 2020, which now I think means so much more when we say, looking back in hindsight 2020.
Oh my gosh, totally.
And I love that. Did 2020 bring out any kind of reflection for you or any kind of awakening,
Yeah.
talking about spirituality during this moment of global crisis?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 gave me this project, right? Because I was an entrepreneur in the women's travel space. I own a women's tour company called Damesley and a women's travel conference called the Women's Travel Fest. And so I was constantly on the road and, I love what I do. Obviously, I have a little airplane tattoo right here on my wrist for those of you watching. I love what I do, but I was exhausting myself by traveling at full speed like that. And I also, I knew that I wanted to write a book at some point in time, and I didn't know like how that would happen or when that would happen. And so the grace, the silver lining of 2020 is that I really had no excuse that I could provide myself because everything that I did went away. And after, a month of being terrified, after I came out of my covers and I was like, okay, now what are we going to do? Because it's a very unique opportunity to have stillness in our lives. And I think this book in particular, it's so emotional. So like it took a lot out of me, but I was also feeling so many things with, the collapse of my businesses. I don't want to say collapse because they're coming back, but like, the 2020 of my businesses and then writing all these traumas out. And it was like such an emotional time. And I remember just being like so many moments of just standing in my kitchen, like coming back into my body and being like, I'm eating out of a jar of peanut butter. How did I get here? Because I was really just invested in it. But it's also a beautiful thing to know that this project introduced me to women like you and the 34 other incredibly special human beings that I got to meet through this idea that I had, and it also in turn ended up healing me from a lot of the things that I was carrying around, not even, always aware of the weight of all of that. And so I'm thankful for 2020 because it stripped me bare and it let me reinvent, what I wanted to live in my life and how I wanted to live it.
I think what you said that really struck with me right now is this gift of stillness. I completely agree with you. I was someone who always loved to travel. My family lives abroad, but I've always used travel as an escape, as a way to not deal with my life problems. Things got hard, I moved. Things got hard, I went on a vacation or wherever. It could have been as close as a drive away, but some kind of an escape and a way to really avoid dealing with the problem. So 2020 was that moment for me too, to just sit and be, oh my God, now I have to deal with what's happening because we literally are not allowed to leave our homes. So it was a moment of facing yourself, and it was a moment of really recounting and accounting for everything that and all the choices that we've made to that point. Hopefully, many of us had that opportunity and took it. I'm sure it's hard for a lot of people, but I understand what you're talking about. If you haven't read this book yet, tell her she can't. By the title, you can tell that it has a lot of stories of overcoming. And with stories of overcoming comes hardship and it comes stories of trauma. So when Kelly's telling us that it was hard to process that, I find that really fascinating. And I hadn't thought about that. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the idea to make this book and make that turn into a reality. Do you think you chose this topic because you yourself are going through this moment of recovery and overcoming?
Yeah, I do. I think that's kind of been like the beat of the backdrop of my life, And but it's funny because I've always been a very happy person outwardly, and but after I turned 30, I had this period of time where I was like, oh my God, like I am not okay. Because until then I was just living my life and I was like, yeah, bad things happen and it's okay. And then at some point, like 30, 31, it hit me and I was like, oh my God, I have to deal with this because I'm finding myself in a string of bad relationships. I'm finding myself repeating these same toxic patterns. I'm, obviously I'm hurting somewhere. And where have I not allowed that to come through me, and where can I grow from that? So even before I wrote this book, I think I had the idea, the title of it came to me while I was taking a bath. I was living in New York City. It was probably 2016 or 17. And the title came through and it said, I just kept hearing, tell her she can't, tell her she can't. And I was like, oh, that's so the motto of my life. Like, that's so my story. And so that night, I remember I bought the domain and I got all the social handles registered. I was like, I'm going to take action on this idea, even if I don't know what it's going to be yet. And so then just in my own process of self-growth, like then I really got to a place where I was like, okay, now I'm ready to really tackle what's going on inside. And I went to therapy and I went to hypnotherapy and I went to Reiki and I did like, I really was like, I don't care how much it costs. I'm investing in myself. I'm going to change these things because what I'm putting out is not what I want. And I'm not living my life the way that I know that I could. And so after I did that, I mean, it still was maybe 2 years before I even started this particular project, but there was a period of self growth that allowed me to believe that I could be an author of a book that people would maybe want to read, that I was worthy enough of telling my story and that maybe it could be inspirational to other people. And, speaking with super badass, strong women is like my forte. I've been doing it at Women's Travel Fest. It's like, and nothing makes me happier. And so just once I got like energetically tuned in to the frequency of like, I can do this, it can be awesome, and I'm going to attract exactly the right people. Like, that's how I met you. That's how I met all the other ladies in the book. And it really, and then once it became not just my project, then there were moments where I pushed myself through for you all because I was like, this isn't just about me. This isn't just for me. And if I have these limiting thoughts that it sucks, then that means that I think their stories suck. And I don't. So I had to really like push myself through that because there's so much anxiety that comes from doing any major step, certainly putting yourself out publicly, but like, sharing trauma stories about what happened from your family, like it's hard. And there were moments that I really, I would sit there and I would have these thoughts like, oh God, I have to delete my Instagram. Like, I got to pull the plug on all this. I can't tell anybody what I'm doing, and then, but then I would think about your story and I would think about, the other women's stories. And I would just think like, but God, they're so strong. And so I can be too, right? Because we can all have these moments of fear and of doubt and of, quote unquote weakness. We can all have these limiting beliefs and we can all push through them and we can prove to ourselves again and again that they're not true. And I think that's really the essence of the whole book, right? It's like you just have to keep telling yourself that you can do things even if they seem really hard and really scary, and maybe especially if they seem really hard and really scary.
And I love that. And I think it's important to really point out here. And I want to ask you that question. How long did it take between the idea first came into your head in New York City in a bathtub to the day that you actually started writing this book?
I think that idea came to me maybe like 2016, and I started writing the book in 2020. So 4 years just of thinking about, if I was going to write a book, what would it be like? And if it was just me, what stories would I include? And then, and then having the realization of like, wait a minute, this can't just be about me because everyone's gone through this, and it would be such a stronger and more true and appropriate book if it could really just be like a shared experiences because, we all know what this is like. We all know what going through this kind of stuff is like. So, and then another 2 years. So, I mean, really, it's been like all in total, probably, 5 years since that day that I got the idea.
And I think that's important because a lot of us see a finished project, be it a film, a book, a painting, a TV show, and we think, oh, that person had access, had opportunity. Oh, this came about so quickly and easily. And then when we find out the behind story, you realize, oh no, this took a long time and a lot of sweat and a lot of fear and a lot of overcoming just to get that wherever it is on the screen, on
Yeah.
paper and all that stuff. So I think that's important to point out as we're talking about overcoming in general. But I really, listening to you, been thinking that you not only at first you're pursuing independency from others, and then now around 2016, when you really took a hard look at yourself, you started to seek independence from your own mind, from your own preconceived ideas of who you believed you were up to that point. And that's really important because we all have patterns. I love that you brought that up, that we continue to repeat. I've had my own patterns in my relationships, and 2020 was that year for me
Hmm.
of sitting and finally not being able to run and not being able to avoid those issues. And, at the breakdown of my previous relationship, and sit and think, but wait a minute, this person is a different color, height, size of the same person that I dated before that, which is kind of a similar look and height and attitude of the one before. Of course, they all vary in stories and places and things like that. But when you take a hard look at the essence of those relationships, they really were very similar. So it is a matter of looking within and realizing, is this an idea that I have of myself that is gravitating me towards these experiences? And if that's the case, then exactly where is it? How can I find it? How can I deal with it? But that takes incredible courage. I will say, when I started to do that work, and I'm not sure how it was for you through your therapy and your Reiki and all that, I would just cry. I remember doing meditation, for guided meditation about being heart-minded and open-hearted, and just weeping for really days at a time. And just, I was in New York City, stuck on a snowstorm, and I couldn't really leave the apartment. So I used that time to really look within. And it's a lot that I saw that I've been avoiding. And the funny thing is, once you address it, it was no longer that scary anymore.
Yeah.
And then I spent another week crying about, why did I waste so much time running away from this, which turns out not to be that big of a deal anyways.
Totally. And the crazy part about all of it is like we're going to always have to do that. Like that's an
Mm-hmm.
ongoing forever process. And I think, with this book, I didn't want to be preachy. I didn't want to be like, I did this and now I'm on the other side of this and I am cured and life is amazing. Like we will always come up against those thoughts that say, you're not good enough for this. Maybe you can't do this. And that may come for you because you've been told it and you internalize it, or it might come because you're just scared because you're pushing yourself past your comfort zone, or it might come because you're dating the wrong people and you know it. I definitely have had that exact same moment that you described, like where I was on a date and I was like, oh my God, I know this person. I know him because I dated him and it was horrible. And then I dated him again and again and again, but not really the same person, but just like versions of that same, because what your brain is putting out, right, you're attracting in. And so realizing like it's not the partners, it's my frequency that I'm on. And so I gotta like address that and up level it. And I think that is forever gonna happen. And like there are moments where I'm doing things that really challenge me and scare me. And still, again, like in the deepest and hardest parts of that, I get those kinds of thoughts. I just gotten better now at being like, I don't believe it. This isn't true, And some people like give those kind of thoughts name. Like they're like, oh, shut up, Bob. Like, go away, not today. And whatever it takes, because I think that's just a part of life and existing. Certainly as women in the world, and just as people who charge forward in the kind of life that they want. And I actually don't feel like I hear enough people talking about that.
I agree. And that's why I started this podcast, because I think it's really important that we really expose, what is really vulnerability, and that's really hard to share. My reason for wanting to share my story with you was that, I realized for this work that growing up, I was very silenced. I was the youngest of four children in a very difficult household, financially. And there was no room for a conversation about emotion. It had nothing to do with them, my parents, not being willing to do it. I'm sure they were, but they were spending so much time just trying to survive, just, provide for food and provide for education and trying to keep us alive, which I'm very grateful for. But, then this emotional side really didn't get addressed. And I learned to just be silent. And I learned that my voice didn't matter and that whatever I wanted wasn't going to be met. So throughout my adult life, I would just accept it and nod, or not really want something, but not really confront it. Just kind of go with it and see where it goes until it comes to that one breaking moment that you cannot do it anymore. You cannot handle it anymore. That's not what you want. And then there's like this rupture of whatever it is in your life. So, my work has been, no, my voice matters. My story has meaning and you could help others. And I want to share it. And, in that place in relationships too. Very recently, I started to learn how to say, hey, this is not okay. You can't treat me like that, but I care about you. And I'm not saying that because I don't want to be your friend. Because I think a lot of people feel that way too. A lot of people have similar issues. And this is why I think this book is so great, is because you realize that, like, collectively there's a voice there of overcoming and of good and bad that you went through it, but good because there's always something better that comes your way, or something that you learned from that experience. So this pursuit of independence, it's primarily within.
Totally. Yeah, it really is. And I think, it's sometimes you just have to be reminded that, like, we're all in it together in one way or another. Like, we're all going through it, and we all have the capacity to survive. Like, we can survive really truly incredible things. And I think that was, for me, I wanted to write the book that I wish that I had had when I was growing up, because if I had had that, it could have given me a place to focus my attention, to be like, oh God, I can make it because she made it, because Stephanie grew up in a car with 5 kids and look what she's done. Or, like, there's just so many people who go through things that are truly unspeakable, but no trauma is lesser than any other. Like, we all go through things that challenge us and that hurt us, and sometimes it's the people that we trust and we love the most that through their own projections and their own limiting beliefs place limitations on us that we don't understand. And I think it's just our job to always question, like, is this true? And is there another way? And that's what I love about you and your tenacity, is like, especially being in Hollywood, like, it's notorious for telling you that you're not enough, or that you can't do it. And I love that instead of just accepting that and, giving up or doing whatever, you've always looked for another way. Like, oh wait, but what if I could do it? Like, what if I could write it? And I love that, because I think there's always, like, if there's an A and a B, there's always a C somewhere. We just have to work to find it, and be creative, and trust that we are enough to find it.
And you were right. That is a question I ask myself all the time. When people tell me no, I've learned through my years doing this business in entertainment and trying to make art and film that has a meaning. When they tell me no, what I tell myself is, okay, just not with you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I tell myself. Okay, I accept it. That's not going to be you. You're not going to be my partner in this journey, and that's okay. The same with relationships now. If no rejection happens for all of us at any time, and at first, through my own need to people please and my own codependencies, and just be like, please let me just fix it. Can we talk about this? And now,
Yeah.
no, the way I live my life is like you said, I know what I bring to the table, and it's sad that you can see it, and it's okay. I accept it, and I wish you the best. And that's the same with at any relationship, really, be it work or be it personal. It comes down to, is this person gonna be this partner through this journey, whatever the journey is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I am so grateful for this book. I think that not only did I learn something from it, I think a lot of young girls and women are also going to feel empowered by the experiences that are shared here. And before we go, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what was your biggest lesson through making this book.
My biggest lesson is, well, it's probably twofold. Number one, on a personal level, I can take all of that pain and negativity and things that have in some capacities been limiting me and totally flip it on its head and use it to push myself forward. And I can prove to myself that I can be an author and that I'm worthy of having a story, and that, that I can be the person that can write a body of work like this, because I think that's also an author's journey. It's a totally separate thing. And then the second thing is that, the world kind of sucks sometimes. People
Yeah.
tell you that you can't do things. And the one thing that I really have learned over and over and over from this book is like the power of personal choice and mindset is truly limitless. So you get to decide, how you react to the circumstances of your life, how you better your life, and how you choose to use it to help affect change for others. And I think when you really get to that place where you can understand that all of the things that have uniquely happened to you have happened for you, and you can use it to help other people, then that creates a kind of energy that makes you totally unstoppable. And that's that's it.
I mean, that's such a little thing.
It's just a tiny
Just a
little life
tiny,
tip.
tiny lesson. But one thing that I've learned from the story of these women is because you can't really help the things that happen to you,
Mhm.
but you can choose how you live your life.
Yep.
And that's the really overall message of this book for me. So before we go, I did read it on your social media that one of your biggest dreams was to be a New York Times bestselling author. And so I want you to tell us where we're at with this book on the charts today. And please share your handles and where to get it and how to get in touch with you
Yeah.
and stay in touch.
Well, like the hot pink rocket that she is, this book is number one on Amazon and Women in Business, I believe. Number one in solo travel. Number one in professional development, and is really just, yeah, proving to me that I can and that it can, and that these stories, desperately need to be told in the kind of world that we live in and the environment that we live in. And yeah, I mean, it came out yesterday, so this is a pretty new interview, and I have nothing but, you know, I'm nothing but proud and optimistic for its future. So it's kicking ass, and I know that it's going to go on and kick more ass, but really ultimately it's like it just needs to get to the people that need it, and these messages and stories need to be told to the people that need to hear them. And so I wrote on my Instagram last night, like, oh, it's a best-selling book and I'm going to bed a best-selling Amazon author, which is awesome. But like, really, that doesn't matter. New York Times would be great. It doesn't matter, because what matters is that the people who read it need it, right? And like that the stories affect change in a micro and in a macro way. But you can find this book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and at tellershecan't.com. It's also on Apple, Google Play, and Kobo. And it's just going to keep on going. I am so excited for the future of this project, and just so thankful to have met you in the time that we created this.
The same. And I feel like now you are one of my partners on this journey of independence and of self awareness, and hopefully creating this community of women and others. Everybody's welcome to overcome wherever they came from. So tell us how we can connect with you on social media.
You can follow me anywhere on the internet at Go Kelly Lewis or at Tell Her She Can't. And
Thank you so
I
much.
think what's so funny, I remember when we did our initial interview, you and we talked for like 90 minutes. And I remember us being like, oh my God, the world's falling out around us, because it was like March 2020 or early April of 2020. And you and I having these moments where we were like just girlfriends talking about how the house was falling down around us. And yet still we wanted to invest energy and time into something like this because we knew it could help other people. And I just keep going back to that. And like, I'm just so thankful that we met, and we got through it, and now it's nothing but up from here. hopefully.
Exactly. And we get to build, build up through like the phoenix for the destruction.
That's right.
Um, and the message for me is luckily similar that it was for you about 2020, about how an opportunity that it was, incredibly hard, but to really face the things that we weren't having the time to face before. And I think that's an experience that as a human race in our generation, or maybe in many to come, that we're not going to have, this moment of like great pause where the entire world stopped and there was no more FOMO. There was no more that person is this and that person is doing that. We were all feeling equally like the ground was taken from our feet. And that's pretty unique and
Yeah,
an experience that I definitely will not forget.
absolutely. Tell her she can't. We will
Exactly.
survive.
You will survive. Exactly. Thank you so much for being here today at Incessantly Seeking. And I can't wait for the world to hear and see this interview along with this book. If you still don't have it, please go get it, gift it. We are approaching the holiday season already again. Oh my God. So it's good for all those things.
It's true. Yep, it's true. And I'm just thank you for having me and thank you for being just such a light in this world. And I'm excited to see how we grow from here.
Me too. Me too. More to come. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Infinitely clinically depressed. And you don't hear about stuff like he's like, well, why would you get like that? It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's a sickness.